My wife accused me of fraud in our own company, using documents she planted herself. She wanted total control, my name and my money. The board was ready to kick me out. That's when I slid a tape with a video of her that made everyone's face turn ghost white. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Edward, and at 62 years old, I thought I knew my wife. I thought I knew the woman I'd shared 23 years of marriage with, the woman who stood beside me as I built Meridian Industries from a small consulting firm into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. I was wrong about everything. It started on a Tuesday morning in October. I remember because the leaves outside our bedroom window had just begun turning that deep amber color Nicole always said reminded her of whiskey. She was already dressed when I woke up, standing at the mirror applying her lipstick with the precision of a surgeon. Something felt different about her that morning, though I couldn't place what it was. "Board meeting today," she said without turning around. "I know you're nervous about the quarterly numbers." I wasn't nervous, the numbers were solid. We'd had our best third quarter in 5 years, and I'd spent weeks preparing my presentation. But Nicole had this way of planting seeds of doubt, little comments that would stick in your mind like splinters. "I'm not nervous," I said, sitting up in bed. "The presentation is ready." She turned then, and for just a moment I caught something in her expression. It was fleeting, but it looked almost like satisfaction, the kind of look someone gets when they know something you don't. "Of course it is, darling. You always prepare so thoroughly." The way she said it made my stomach turn, though I couldn't explain why. I arrived at the office early, as I always did. Meridian Industries occupied 3 floors of a glass building downtown, and my corner office overlooked the river. I'd built this place with my own hands, made decisions that kept 37 families fed and housed. It was my life's work. Margaret, my assistant of 12 years, greeted me with coffee and her usual smile, but even she seemed different that morning. Her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine, and her hands shook slightly as she handed me my schedule. "The board meeting has been moved up to 9 o'clock, she said quietly. "Moved up? Why?" I don't know, Mr. Hartwell. The call came from Mrs. Hartwell's office." Nicole didn't have an office. She'd never worked at Meridian, never showed interest in the business beyond asking about profit margins at dinner parties. Why would the call come from her office? At 8:45, I walked into the boardroom to find all 7 board members already seated. Their faces were grave, the kind of expressions you see at funerals. Nicole sat at the far end of the table, her hands folded, her face a mask of concern and sorrow. "Edward," said Richard Pemberton, our chairman, "please take a seat." I'd known Richard for 15 years. We'd played golf together, attended each other's children's weddings. The man looking at me now was a stranger. "What's this about?" "We need to discuss some irregularities that have come to light in the company's financial records." My blood went cold. "Irregularities?" Nicole spoke for the first time. "Darling, I'm so sorry. I wish there was another way to handle this." Her voice was perfect. The right amount of pain, the right amount of reluctance, but I knew Nicole's tells. The way she touched her pearl necklace when she was lying. The slight tightness around her eyes when she was performing. She was performing now. Richard slid a manila folder across the table. "These documents were found in your office safe yesterday evening." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were invoices, contracts, payment authorizations, all bearing my signature, all for services that had never been rendered, payments to companies I'd never heard of. The amounts were staggering. $200,000 here, $350,000 there, over $2 million in fraudulent transactions spanning the past 18 months. "I've never seen these before in my life," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Edward," Nicole said softly, "I found them when I was looking for the insurance documents you asked me to get from your safe. I didn't want to believe it either." The room spun. Nicole had access to my safe. I'd given her the combination years ago for emergencies. But she'd never used it, never even mentioned it. Why would she be looking there for insurance documents that were kept in our home filing cabinet? The signatures have been verified by a handwriting expert, Richard continued. They're authentic. I stared at the documents, at my own signature on papers I'd never signed. The handwriting was perfect, too perfect. Every loop and curve exactly as I would have written it, but something was off. The pressure was different, the angle slightly wrong. These signatures had been traced. "This is impossible," I said. "These companies, I've never heard of any of them." "We've already begun an investigation," said board member Patricia Chen. "The funds were transferred to accounts that were then immediately closed. The money has disappeared." "You think I stole from my own company?" The silence that followed was my answer. Nicole leaned forward, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Edward, if you're in some kind of trouble, if someone was pressuring you, we can work through this together, but you have to tell us the truth." Her performance was flawless. The concerned wife standing by her husband even in the face of overwhelming evidence. But I saw the micro-expression that flickered across her face for just a fraction of a second when she thought no one was looking. It was triumph. "I need time to review these documents," I said. "This is clearly some kind of mistake." "Of course," Richard said. "We'll reconvene tomorrow morning. Until then, you're suspended from all company operations." The words hit me like a physical blow. Suspended from my own company. The business I'd built, the employees who depended on me, the legacy I'd spent decades creating, all of it hanging by a thread because of documents I'd never seen before. As the board members filed out, Nicole approached me. She placed her hand on my shoulder, and I had to resist the urge to shrug it off. "I know this is difficult," she whispered, "but everything will work out. You'll see." I watched her leave, watched the way she walked with just a little too much confidence for someone whose husband had just been accused of embezzlement. And that's when I noticed it. The way she checked her phone as she reached the door, the tiny smile that played at the corners of her mouth as she read whatever message was waiting there. That night, I sat in my study, going through every financial record I could find, trying to make sense of what had happened. The documents in that folder were sophisticated forgeries, the kind that would require inside knowledge of our systems, our procedures, our security protocols. I was reaching for my phone to call our security consultant when I noticed the red light blinking on my desk phone. A voicemail. I pressed play, expecting to hear Margaret's voice or perhaps one of our clients. Instead, I heard Nicole's voice, crystal clear and unmistakably hers. But she wasn't talking to me. "The documents are in place. He'll never see it coming. By this time tomorrow, everything will be ours." The recording cut off. My hands were shaking as I checked the timestamp. The message had been recorded 3 days ago at 2:17 in the afternoon. I'd been in meetings all day. Nicole had been alone in my office. She'd used my phone to make a call, not knowing that our system automatically recorded any outgoing calls longer than 5 minutes for quality assurance. She'd been so focused on executing her plan that she'd forgotten about the one security measure I'd never told her about. I played the message again, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was definitely Nicole's, but the tone was nothing like the woman I thought I knew. This voice was cold, calculating, triumphant. "Everything will be ours." Not "everything will be okay" or "everything will work out." Everything will be ours. I sat back in my chair, the full weight of my situation finally hitting me. My wife of 23 years had systematically planned my destruction. She had access to my office, my safe, my signature specimens for the handwriting expert to copy. She knew our security protocols, our board members, our weaknesses, but she'd made one mistake. She'd left evidence of her own conspiracy on my phone system, and if there was one message, there might be others. I spent the rest of the night going through call logs, listening to fragments of conversations, piecing together the puzzle of my wife's betrayal. By morning, I had enough evidence to know that this conspiracy went deeper than I'd imagined. The question was, how much deeper? And more importantly, what else had Nicole planned that I didn't know about yet? I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nicole's face from the boardroom, that perfect mask of concern hiding something dark and calculating underneath. I kept playing that voicemail over and over, trying to decode the words, trying to understand how the woman I'd shared a bed with for over 2 decades had become a stranger plotting my destruction. By 6 in the morning, I was dressed and back at the office, determined to gather more evidence before the board meeting. Margaret was already there, which surprised me. She usually didn't arrive until 8:30. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, startling when she saw me. "I didn't expect you so early." "Neither did I," I replied, studying her face. "Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." She nodded, but her eyes darted toward the elevators as if she was expecting someone. "Has anyone been in my office when I wasn't here? Anyone at all?" Margaret's face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, she whispered, "Mrs. Hartwell has been here several times over the past few months. She said you'd asked her to retrieve files for you." My stomach dropped. "How many times?" I don't know exactly. Maybe 5 or 6. She always came when you were at client meetings or traveling. She said you'd given her permission." Of course she had. Nicole knew my schedule better than anyone. She'd timed her visits perfectly always when I was guaranteed to be away for hours. "Did she ever go into my office alone?" Margaret's silence was answer enough. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock again, but at 8:45 Richard called my cell phone. "Edward, we need you here now. There have been developments." I found them all assembled in the conference room, but this time they weren't alone. 2 men in dark suits sat at one end of the table, their badges clearly visible, federal investigators. Nicole was there too, but now she sat next to Richard instead of at the far end of the table. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. She'd positioned herself with the board against me. "Edward," Richard began, his voice heavy with disappointment, "after yesterday's revelations, we felt it necessary to conduct a more thorough investigation." One of the federal agents, a stern-faced man named Detective Morrison, opened a laptop. "Mr. Hartwell, we've been examining your company's financial records. What we've found is concerning." The screen filled with bank statements, wire transfers, and payment authorizations, all bearing my signature, all for amounts that made yesterday's discoveries look like petty cash. "These transactions total $4.7 million over the past 2 years. Morrison continued. "All authorized by you, all transferred to shell companies that were dissolved immediately after receiving payment." I stared at the screen, watching my entire life's work being painted as an elaborate theft. I never authorized any of these transactions. "Yet, here's your signature on every single document," the second agent said. "And these aren't photocopies, Mr. Hartwell. These are the original documents retrieved from your personal files." "That's impossible. I would never—" "Edward," Nicole interrupted softly, and every eye in the room turned to her. She looked devastated, like a woman watching her world crumble. "I found something else." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small leather notebook. My leather notebook, the one I kept in my home office for jotting down ideas and reminders. "I was cleaning your study yesterday and this fell out from behind your desk," she said, her voice breaking slightly. I opened it, hoping it might explain what was happening. Richard took the notebook and opened it. His face went gray. "These appear to be handwritten notes detailing the fraudulent transactions," he said quietly. "Amounts, dates, account numbers, all in your handwriting, Edward." My blood turned to ice. I knew that notebook. I'd been looking for it for months, assuming I'd misplaced it somewhere. The entries Richard was reading had never been written by me, but the handwriting was unmistakably mine. Someone had not only copied my signature, they'd learned to mimic my entire handwriting style. "May I see that?" I asked. Richard slid the notebook across the table. As I flipped through the pages, my heart sank further with each entry. Dates, amounts, cryptic notes about securing funds and ensuring continuity. It read like the diary of a man systematically looting his own company. But there was something wrong with it, something that nagged at the edge of my consciousness. The handwriting was perfect, too perfect. In 23 years of marriage, Nicole had seen thousands of examples of my writing. She'd had access to every document, every note, every scrap of paper that bore my hand. "This isn't mine," I said firmly. Nicole's eyes filled with tears. "Edward, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. If you cooperate, maybe we can work something out, maybe." "Where did you really find this notebook, Nicole?" She blinked, clearly not expecting the direct challenge. "I told you. Behind your desk." "Behind my desk," I repeated slowly. "The desk that's been pushed against the wall for 3 years because we had the floors refinished. The desk that would require 2 people to move." A flicker of something crossed her face before she recovered. It must have fallen there recently." "Recently?" I opened the notebook to a page dated 18 months ago. "This entry is from last March. How could it have fallen there recently?" The room fell silent. I could see the wheels turning in Richard's mind, the first tiny crack appearing in Nicole's carefully constructed narrative. Detective Morrison cleared his throat. "Mr. Hartwell, regardless of where the notebook was found, the handwriting analysis confirms these entries are yours." "Then your analyst is wrong," I said. "Or they're working with incomplete information." Nicole leaned forward, her performance ratcheting up a notch. "Edward, I know you're scared. I know you think everyone's against you, but I'm your wife. I love you if you just tell us the truth." "The truth?" I cut her off. "The truth is that someone has been planning this for months. Someone with access to my office, my files, my personal belongings, someone who knew exactly when I'd be away, exactly which documents to forge, exactly how to make it look authentic." Nicole's face went very still. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, I'm stating a fact. Whoever did this had intimate knowledge of my routines, my security protocols, my handwriting. They knew which board members would be most susceptible to pressure, which investigators to call, which evidence would be most damaging." "Edward," Richard warned, "you need to be very careful about the accusations you're making." "Do I?" "Because it seems like everyone else in this room is perfectly comfortable making accusations." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "I've spent 15 years building relationships with every person on this board. I've been transparent about every decision, every expenditure, every strategic move. But now, based on documents that mysteriously appeared overnight, you're all ready to believe I'm a criminal." "The evidence is overwhelming," Patricia Chen said quietly. "The evidence is manufactured." I shot back. "And I'm going to prove it." Nicole stood as well, her face a picture of wounded dignity. "How can you stand there and accuse me of what? Framing my own husband? Destroying the man I love?" "Because the woman I loved would never have had access to documents that were supposedly found in my office, safe 3 days ago while I was in Chicago on business. The woman I loved would have called me immediately if she'd found evidence of wrongdoing, not waited to present it to the board like a prosecutor building a case." The room was silent except for the sound of Nicole's sharp intake of breath. "The woman I loved," I continued, "wouldn't have known to look for insurance documents in my office safe when those documents have been kept in our home filing cabinet for the past 5 years." Nicole's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. "I was confused. I was upset. I wasn't thinking clearly." "No," I said quietly. "You were thinking very clearly. You've been thinking clearly for months." Detective Morrison closed his laptop. "Mr. Hartwell, I think we should continue this conversation at the station." "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet. But we'd like you to come in for formal questioning." I looked around the room at the faces of people I'd trusted, people I'd considered friends. Only Margaret seemed troubled by what was happening, her eyes darting between me and Nicole with growing confusion. "Fine," I said, "but I want my lawyer present." As I gathered my things, Nicole approached me one last time. She placed her hand on my arm, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "This doesn't have to destroy us, Edward. If you cooperate, if you make this easy, we can rebuild." Together. I looked into her eyes, searching for any trace of the woman I'd married. What I found instead was something cold and calculating, something that had been hiding behind 23 years of shared meals and shared beds. "Nicole," I said quietly, "I have one question for you." She nodded, her expression hopeful. "When did you start hating me?" The mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw the truth in her eyes. This wasn't about money or greed or even ambition. This was personal. This was revenge for something I didn't even know I'd done. "I never hated you, Edward," she whispered. "I just stopped needing you." As I walked out of the boardroom, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced down and froze. The message was from my own phone number, the office line that sat on my desk. But I wasn't in my office. I was walking down the hallway toward the elevator. The message contained 2 words: "You're next." Someone was in my office right now using my phone, watching me leave, and they wanted me to know it. I turned back toward the boardroom, but Nicole was already gone. The elevator doors closed, and as I descended toward the parking garage, I realized that everything I'd discovered so far was just the beginning. Nicole's conspiracy wasn't just about framing me for embezzlement. It was about something much worse, and I was running out of time to figure out what that was. The police station smelled like disinfectant and desperation. I sat in a gray interrogation room with my lawyer, David Chen, Patricia's husband, ironically enough, waiting for Detective Morrison to return with what he claimed would be final evidence of my guilt. David had been skeptical when I called him at 6 in the morning, but something in my voice must have convinced him this wasn't the straightforward embezzlement case the media was already painting it as. "Edward," he said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "I've known you for 8 years. If you tell me you didn't do this, I believe you, but belief isn't going to be enough. We need proof." "I have proof," I said quietly. "The question is whether anyone will believe it." The door opened and Morrison walked in carrying a thick manila folder. Behind him came Nicole, escorted by Ekopahaba, victim's advocate, a nice touch that made her look even more sympathetic. "Mrs. Hartwell," Morrison said, "has provided us with additional evidence that came to light this morning." Nicole sat across from me, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying for hours. She probably had been, not from grief but from the stress of maintaining her performance. "Edward," she said softly, "I hoped it wouldn't come to this. I really did." Morrison opened the folder and spread out photographs across the table, bank statements, deposit slips, copies of cashier's checks, all made out to E. Hartwell, all deposited into an account I'd never seen before. "This account was opened 18 months ago," Morrison said. "It's registered to your name and social security number, Mr. Hartwell. The deposits match exactly with the missing funds from Meridian Industries." I stared at the statements, my mouth going dry. The account showed a balance of $4.7 million, built up through systematic deposits over nearly 2 years. According to these records, I'd been siphoning money from my own company and hiding it in a secret account. "I've never seen this account before in my life," I said. "The bank has your signature card on file," Morrison replied, "along with a copy of your driver's license and social security card used to open the account." Nicole leaned forward, her voice breaking. "Edward, I found the bank statements hidden in your golf bag this morning. I had to bring them in. I couldn't be an accessory to this." My golf bag. The one that sat in our garage, untouched for 3 months because of my back problems. The one Nicole had easy access to whenever she wanted to plant evidence. "May I see the signature card?" David asked. Morrison slid it across the table. There it was. My signature, perfect in every detail, authorizing the opening of an account I'd never heard of, but something was wrong with it. Something subtle that anyone else would miss, but after 62 years of signing my own name, I could spot immediately. "This signature is a forgery," I said. "Mr. Hartwell," Morrison sighed, "we've had it analyzed by 3 different experts. It's authentic." "No, it's not. Look at the way the E connects to the D in Edward. See that little loop? I haven't made that loop in my signature for over 5 years. I changed it after I injured my wrist in a skiing accident, but whoever forged this was working from older examples of my signature." David examined the document closely. He's right. I've seen Edward's signature dozens of times on legal documents. This loop hasn't been there for years. Morrison frowned, clearly not expecting this level of detail. Signatures can vary. Not like this, I interrupted. And there's something else. This signature is too consistent. Look at these bank statements. Dozens of transactions over 18 months and every single signature is identical. No one signs their name. Exactly the same way every single time. There should be natural variations in pressure, angle, size. These signatures were traced from a template. Nicole's face remained perfectly composed, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. She hadn't expected me to notice the signature discrepancy. "Edward," she said gently, "I know you're grasping for explanations, but—" "Actually," I cut her off, reaching into my briefcase, "I have something that might interest everyone." I pulled out a small digital recorder and placed it on the table. Morrison and David both leaned forward while Nicole's face went very still. 3 nights ago, I found this message on my office voicemail system, I said, pressing play. Nicole's voice filled the room, crystal clear and unmistakably hers. "The documents are in place. He'll never see it coming. By this time tomorrow, everything will be ours." The silence that followed was deafening. Nicole stared at the recorder like it was a venomous snake. That's taken out of context," she stammered. "I was talking about something else entirely." "What were you talking about?" David asked quietly. I was discussing surprise party plans with my sister for Edward's birthday next month." Morrison looked skeptical. "The message is time-stamped 3 days before the evidence against your husband came to light." "Coincidence," Nicole said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. I reached into my briefcase again and pulled out a transcript. "This is interesting, Nicole, because I called your sister Linda yesterday. She's been in Europe for the past month visiting her daughter. She hasn't spoken to you since early September." Nicole's face went pale. I misspoke. It wasn't Linda, it was my friend Sarah." "Sarah Morrison?" I asked. "Because I called her too. She said you haven't spoken in over a year, not since you accused her of flirting with me at the company Christmas party." The room was so quiet I could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Nicole's carefully constructed web of lies was beginning to unravel, and everyone could see it. "Mr. Hartwell," Morrison said slowly, "do you have any other evidence?" "I do," I said. "But first I want to ask my wife a question." Nicole's jaw tightened. "Go ahead." "The insurance documents you claim to be looking for in my office safe, what kind of insurance were they?" "Life insurance," she said quickly. "For what purpose?" I needed to update the beneficiary information." I nodded slowly. "Interesting. Because our life insurance policies are held by Mutual of Hartford, and all beneficiary changes have to be made at their offices, not with documents from my safe. The only documents in my safe related to insurance are the earthquake coverage for the building, which has nothing to do with beneficiaries." Nicole's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Furthermore," I continued, "I called Mutual of Hartford yesterday. According to their records, you tried to access my policy information 6 weeks ago, claiming you needed to file a death claim." The room erupted. Morrison sat back in his chair, David's eyes widened, and the victim's advocate looked confused. "That's not true," Nicole said, but her voice was shaking now. "I have the phone records," I said calmly. "The insurance company keeps detailed logs of all inquiries. You called on September 15th at 2:37 p.m. You told them I had died in a car accident and you needed to initiate a claim for $3.5 million. Morrison leaned forward. "Mrs. Hartwell, is this true?" I was confused. I had a nightmare that Edward had died, and I called to ask hypothetical questions about the policy. I was emotional, not thinking clearly." "You gave them my social security number and date of birth," I said. "You provided details about a fictional car accident, including the supposed date, time, and location. That's not a confused phone call, Nicole. That's attempted insurance fraud." The advocate whispered something to Morrison, who nodded grimly. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, "I think we need to have a separate conversation." Nicole stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. You're all believing the word of a man who stole millions from his own company over the word of his wife who's trying to do the right thing." "Actually," David said quietly, "we're believing documented evidence and recorded conversations over increasingly contradictory explanations." Nicole's mask was finally starting to slip. The grieving, supportive wife was being replaced by something harder, more calculating. "Fine," she said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "You want to know the truth? Yes, I called the insurance company. Yes, I've been in Edward's office, but not for the reasons you think." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Then why?" Nicole looked directly at me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw the real woman underneath the performance. "Because I know what my husband is really capable of," she said coldly, "and I was trying to protect myself before he destroyed me too." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. This wasn't grief or confusion anymore. This was something much more dangerous. "What do you mean by that?" David asked. Nicole smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Edward isn't the man you all think he is. He's not the devoted husband or the ethical businessman. He's a predator, and I have proof." She reached into her purse and pulled out another recording device. "You want to hear recordings?" she said. "Let me play you some conversations my husband had when he thought I wasn't listening. Conversations about eliminating problems, about making people disappear, about doing whatever it takes to protect his precious company." My blood ran cold. I had no idea what she was about to play, but that look in her eyes told me it was going to be devastating. Morrison gestured for her to continue. Nicole pressed play, and my own voice filled the room. "We need to eliminate the problem permanently. I don't care what it costs or what we have to do. Some people just need to disappear." The words hit me like a physical blow. I remembered that conversation. It was about a persistent industrial spy who'd been trying to steal our client list. We'd been discussing hiring better cybersecurity, maybe involving the FBI, but taken out of context, played without the full conversation, it sounded like I was planning murder. "That's not what that conversation was about," I said desperately. "Isn't it?" Nicole asked. "Tell me, Edward, what were you really discussing when you said some people need to disappear?" I opened my mouth to explain, but she pressed play again, another snippet of my voice. "If they keep pushing, we'll have to take more drastic measures. I won't let anyone threaten what I've built." Again, I remembered the context. We'd been discussing a hostile takeover attempt, but without context, it sounded sinister. Nicole had been recording me for months, collecting fragments of conversations, building a library of out-of-context statements that could be weaponized against me. "My husband," she said to the room, "is a dangerous man, and I've been living in fear of him for years." But as she spoke, I noticed something. Something that gave me hope for the first time in days. Nicole had made her own mistake. In her eagerness to destroy me, she'd revealed something she shouldn't have. The recording device she was using was the same model as mine. The same model I'd bought 2 of last Christmas. One for me, one for her, so we could record our thoughts and ideas when we were apart. But Nicole had claimed she'd lost hers months ago. She'd even asked me to buy her a replacement, which I'd done. So where had this recording device come from? And more importantly, if she'd been afraid of me for years, why had she been systematically planning my destruction instead of simply leaving? The pieces of her story weren't adding up, and I was beginning to see the full scope of what she'd been planning. This wasn't just about money or even revenge. This was about something much bigger, something that would shock everyone in this room when they finally understood the truth. But I had to be careful. Nicole was desperate now, and desperate people make dangerous choices. I just had to make sure her next choice didn't destroy us both. The interrogation room felt smaller now, the walls closing in as Nicole's accusations hung in the air like poison gas. She sat back in her chair with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just played their trump card, waiting for the room to turn against me completely. But I'd spent 40 years in business, learning to read people, to spot weaknesses, to find leverage when everyone thought I had none. And Nicole had just given me exactly what I needed. "That's a very interesting recording device, Nicole," I said calmly. Her satisfied expression flickered slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean I recognize it. It's the same model as mine, the Olympus VN720LE, limited edition. They only made 2,000 of them worldwide, and I bought 2 of them last Christmas, one for me, one for you." Detective Morrison leaned forward. "What's your point, Mr. Hartwell?" "My point is that Nicole told me she lost her recorder in March. She was very upset about it, said it had fallen out of her purse at the grocery store. She even asked me to buy her a replacement, which I did. A standard VN720, not the limited edition." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a small receipt. "Here's the credit card statement from when I bought her the replacement in April. Best Buy, $99.99. Nicole's face had gone very still, but she recovered quickly. "I found the old one later. It was in my car." "Under the seat," I said. "Yes, that's what you told me. But here's the thing about the VN720LE. It has a unique serial number that's registered to the purchaser for warranty purposes." I pulled out my phone and opened an email. "This morning, I contacted Olympus customer service. They confirmed that both devices I purchased are registered to my name and address. Device 1, serial number VN720LE004789, and device 2, serial number VN720LE004790. Morrison was taking notes now. "And device 2, the one Nicole is using right now, was reported stolen to the manufacturer in June." The room went dead silent. "Stolen?" the victim's advocate asked. "By Nicole herself," I continued. "She called Olympus claiming it had been stolen from her car and requested that it be deactivated for warranty purposes. She provided the serial number, her name as the user, and filed a police report number." I handed Morrison a printed email. "Here's the manufacturer's response to my inquiry this morning. The device currently in my wife's possession was officially reported stolen by her 3 months ago." Nicole's jaw tightened. "I found it later and forgot to call them back." "You forgot to call them back, but you remembered to use it to record secret conversations with your husband?" David was staring at Nicole with growing suspicion. "Mrs. Hartwell, why would you report a device stolen if you intended to keep using it?" Nicole's composure was cracking now. "I was confused. I make mistakes when I'm stressed." "Or," I said quietly, "you reported it stolen because you wanted to create a paper trail that would make it seem like someone else was using it. Someone who might have broken into our home, stolen the device, and used it to record me without my knowledge." Morrison set down his pen. "Are you suggesting your wife planned to frame someone else for these recordings?" "I'm suggesting my wife has been planning this for a very long time, and she's been very careful to create alternative explanations for every piece of evidence she's manufactured." I reached into my briefcase again, but not careful enough. This time I pulled out a thick folder of bank statements and photographs. Nicole's eyes widened slightly when she saw them. "3 days ago, I hired a private investigator," I said. "Someone discreet, someone with experience in financial fraud cases. I wanted to understand how someone could have accessed my personal information so easily." Morrison opened the folder and began examining the contents. His expression grew more serious with each page. "These are bank statements for an account held by Nicole Hartwell," I continued, "a personal account she opened 6 months ago without my knowledge, despite the fact that we've shared joint finances for our entire marriage." Nicole's face had gone pale. "I'm entitled to my own bank account." "Of course you are. But this account has some interesting activity. Large cash deposits, always in amounts just under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting requirements. The deposits started 8 months ago and continued right up until last week." I pointed to a highlighted line on one of the statements. "This deposit, made on October 3rd, is particularly interesting. It's for $9,850, exactly the amount my company paid to Hartwell Consulting Services for document analysis that same week." Morrison looked up. Hartwell Consulting Services? A company that was incorporated in Delaware 4 months ago, I said, ostensibly owned by someone named N.H. Hartwell. According to the incorporation documents, this company specializes in handwriting analysis and document authentication. The blood drained from Nicole's face. My wife, I continued, has been billing my company for fraudulent services through a shell corporation she created using her own initials. She's been paying herself to analyze the very documents she was forging. David whistled low. That's incredibly sophisticated. It gets better, I said, pulling out another document. The private investigator also discovered that Nicole has been in contact with a professional forger named Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb was released from federal prison 18 months ago after serving time for document fraud. According to his phone records, which the investigator obtained through legal channels, he's been in regular contact with someone using a burner phone registered to the address of our country club. Nicole stood up abruptly. This is harassment. You're invading my privacy, making wild accusations. I'm presenting evidence, I said calmly. Evidence that shows a systematic long-term plan to defraud my company and frame me for the crime. Morrison was studying the documents intently. Mr. Hartwell, how did your investigator obtain phone records without a warrant? Marcus Webb is still on federal probation, David explained. His communications are subject to monitoring as a condition of his release. When the probation office was informed that he might be involved in a new fraud scheme, they cooperated with the investigation. I pulled out one final document, a photograph that made Nicole sink back into her chair. This photo was taken last Tuesday at a coffee shop downtown. It shows my wife meeting with Marcus Webb. They're exchanging what appears to be a manila envelope. The photograph was clear and damning. Nicole sat across from a thin man with graying hair, sliding an envelope across the table. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 days before the board meeting where I was first accused. This was a business meeting, Nicole said weakly. He was helping me with a surprise for Edward. What kind of surprise requires the services of a convicted document forger? Morrison asked. Nicole's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I leaned forward, my voice steady and controlled. Detective Morrison, I believe my wife has been planning to fake my death. The room erupted. Morrison's pen clattered to the table. David sucked in a sharp breath, and even the victim's advocate looked shocked. That's insane, Nicole whispered. Is it? You called the insurance company asking about death benefits. You reported your recording device stolen to create plausible deniability for the incriminating recordings. You created a shell company to legitimize forged documents. You've been systematically moving money into hidden accounts, and you've been working with a professional forger who specializes in identity documents. I paused, letting the implications sink in. The plan was simple, wasn't it, Nicole? Frame me for embezzlement, drive me to desperation, then stage my death, probably a suicide from guilt and shame. You'd inherit everything, including the insurance payout. Plus, you'd have access to the hidden accounts you've been building, the grieving widow vindicated after her husband's crimes came to light. Nicole was shaking now, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. You're insane. I would never— The only problem, I continued, was that you needed me to actually be dead for it to work. And that's where Marcus Webb came in, isn't it? He wasn't just forging documents, he was helping you plan something much more permanent. Morrison was on his feet now. Mrs. Hartwell, I think you need to speak with a lawyer before this conversation continues. But Nicole wasn't listening. She was staring at me with pure hatred, the mask finally completely gone. You have no idea what you've done, she said, her voice low and venomous. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what's coming. What's coming, Nicole? She smiled then, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen on another human being. You'll find out soon enough. Morrison moved to restrain her, but Nicole was already reaching into her purse. For a moment, I thought she was going for a weapon, but instead she pulled out a cell phone. She typed something quickly and hit send, then dropped the phone on the table. Too late, she said softly. It's already in motion. Morrison grabbed the phone and read the message. His face went white. Get me a SWAT team to Meridian Industries immediately, he barked into his radio. We have a potential bomb threat. My blood turned to ice. What did you do, Nicole? She laughed, high and hysterical. I told you I was protecting myself. If I can't have everything, then no one can. The message on her phone was simple. Do it now. As sirens began wailing in the distance, I realized that all my evidence, all my careful detective work, might be meaningless. Because Nicole hadn't just been planning to destroy me. She'd been planning to destroy everything I'd ever built, and I might already be too late to stop her. The sirens grew louder as Detective Morrison barked orders into his radio, coordinating the emergency response to Meridian Industries. Nicole sat in her chair with that terrifying smile, watching the chaos she'd unleashed with obvious satisfaction. But something wasn't right. Something about her reaction, about the timing, about the whole situation felt off. In 40 years of business, I'd learned to trust my instincts when something didn't add up. Detective Morrison, I said quietly, I don't think you should send that SWAT team. He whirled around, his face flushed with anger and adrenaline. Your wife just sent a message authorizing what appears to be a bomb threat, Mr. Hartwell. We have to take it seriously. I agree, but I think Nicole wants you to send that team. Morrison paused, his radio halfway to his mouth. What do you mean? I studied Nicole's face, noting the way her eyes kept darting toward the door, the way her breathing had become shallow and rapid. She wasn't just enjoying the chaos. She was waiting for something. Nicole, I said calmly, who did you send that message to? Her smile faltered slightly. I don't know what you mean. The message that said, do it now. Who was the recipient? Morrison looked down at the phone. The number is blocked. Because there is no recipient, I said. Nicole sent that message to a disconnected number, or possibly to no one at all. She wanted us to see her send it, wanted to create panic and confusion. Nicole's face went pale. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because I think everything you've done today has been a performance designed to distract us from something else, something that's happening right now while we're all focused on a fake bomb threat. I pulled out my own phone and dialed Margaret's number. She answered on the first ring. Margaret, I need you to check something for me immediately. Go to my office and tell me if anything looks different. Mr. Hartwell, I'm not supposed to let anyone into your office. The police said, Margaret, this is an emergency. Just look through the glass door and tell me what you see. There was a pause. Then Margaret's voice came back confused. Sir, there's someone in your office, a man I don't recognize. He's at your computer. My blood ran cold. Call building security immediately. Don't let him leave. I hung up and turned to Morrison. Detective, the real crime isn't a bomb threat. Someone is in my office right now, probably destroying evidence or planting more forged documents. Morrison was already radioing for units to be diverted to the building when David's phone rang. He answered it, his face growing increasingly grim as he listened. That was Patricia, he said when he hung up. The board called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. They're voting to remove you as CEO and transfer all authority to Nicole as your designated proxy. Nicole's smile returned, wider than before. I'm your wife, Edward. In the absence of criminal charges being filed, the board has decided I'm the most qualified person to protect the company's interests. Designated proxy, I said. I never designated you as my proxy. Actually, you did. She pulled out another document from her seemingly endless supply. Last month, you signed papers updating the company's succession plan. Your signature is right there. I looked at the document, recognizing another perfect forgery, but this time I was ready for it. That's interesting, Nicole, because last month I was in the hospital for 3 days with pneumonia. I was unconscious for most of that time, and when I was awake, I was heavily sedated. The medical records will show that I was in no condition to sign anything. Her confidence flickered again. Furthermore, I continued, I never updated any succession plan because our existing bylaws already specify that in the event of my incapacitation, authority transfers to Richard Pemberton as chairman, not to any family member. Morrison was taking notes furiously. "Mrs. Hartwell, when exactly did your husband sign this document?" I don't remember the exact date." "According to the notary stamp," David said, examining the paper, "it was signed on October 8th at 2:15 p.m. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my calendar. October 8th, 2:15 p.m. I was in the intensive care unit at St. Mary's Hospital, intubated and on a ventilator. I have witnesses, doctors, nurses, my entire medical team." The room fell silent except for the sound of Morrison's pen scratching across his notepad. "Nicole," I said quietly, "it's over. Every document you've forged, every lie you've told, every scheme you've concocted, it's all falling apart." But instead of defeat, I saw something else in her eyes. Desperation, yes, but also a kind of manic determination. "You think you're so clever," she whispered, "but you still don't understand what this is really about." "Then explain it to me." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This was never about money, Edward. This was never about the company or the insurance or any of it." "What was it about?" Nicole stood up slowly, her hands shaking with rage. "It was about watching you lose everything the way I lost everything 23 years ago." The room went quiet. Even Morrison stopped writing. "What did you lose 23 years ago?" David asked, gently. Nicole's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, concentrated hatred. "My life," she whispered. "My career, my future, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of, all of it destroyed because of him." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Nicole, what are you talking about? You don't even remember, do you?" She turned to face me fully, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw raw, honest emotion in her expression. 23 years ago, I was Sarah Nicole Brennan. I was a financial analyst at Hartwell & Associates, your father's firm. I was 26 years old, brilliant, ambitious, and completely invisible to everyone around me. My mouth went dry. Sarah Brennan. I did remember that name vaguely, a junior analyst who'd worked at my father's firm before I took it over. "I had uncovered a massive embezzlement scheme," Nicole continued. "One of the senior partners was stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from client accounts. I had documented everything, prepared a complete report, gathered irrefutable evidence." She paused, wiping away a tear with the back of her hand. "I brought the evidence to you, the heir apparent, the golden boy who was supposed to be taking over the firm. You were 39, handsome, successful, and I was just another faceless employee trying to get your attention." The memory came flooding back. A young woman with dark hair and nervous energy, clutching a folder of financial documents. She'd been trying to tell me something about discrepancies in the books, but I'd been distracted, focused on a major client presentation. "You dismissed me," Nicole said, her voice growing stronger. "You told me to handle it through proper channels, to file a report with HR. You were too busy, too important to deal with the concerns of a junior analyst." I remembered now. I'd been preparing for the biggest presentation of my career, trying to secure a client that would make or break the firm's future. I'd barely listened to what she was saying. "So I followed your advice," Nicole continued. "I filed a report with HR. And do you know what happened next?" I shook my head, though I was beginning to suspect. The senior partner I'd accused was sleeping with the HR director. My report disappeared, the evidence vanished, and within a week I was fired for performance issues and unprofessional conduct. Morrison was writing again, capturing every word. "But that wasn't the worst part," Nicole said. "The worst part was that when I tried to find another job, I discovered that my reputation had been destroyed. Word had spread that I was a troublemaker, someone who made false accusations against respected colleagues. No one in the financial industry would hire me." She sat back down, her entire body trembling with the weight of 23-year-old rage. "I lost everything. My career, my apartment, my savings, all because the great Edward Hartwell couldn't be bothered to listen to a lowly analyst for 5 minutes. The room was dead silent. I stared at Nicole, seeing her clearly for the first time in decades. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd shared my life with, was someone whose life I'd unknowingly destroyed. "So you married me," I said quietly. "You changed your name, created a new identity, and married me for revenge." Nicole nodded. "It took me 3 years to reinvent myself. 3 years of working minimum wage jobs, taking night classes, building a completely new persona. I became Nicole Hartwell, the charming woman you met at a charity gala, the woman who seemed perfect for you." "And you've been planning this for 23 years?" "No," she said. "For the first 15 years, I actually thought I could forget. I thought maybe I could be happy with you, build a real life. But every day, seeing your success, watching you be praised for building an empire on the foundation your father laid, the same foundation I'd tried to protect, it ate at me like cancer." She looked around the room, her eyes wild. 8 years ago, I decided I couldn't live with it anymore. That's when the planning began. I studied your routines, your weaknesses, your business practices. I learned everything about document forgery, financial fraud, identity theft. I became an expert in all the things I needed to destroy you completely. Morrison cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hartwell, are you confessing to a conspiracy to commit fraud?" Nicole laughed. "I'm confessing to justice, Detective. For 23 years, Edward Hartwell has lived a life that should have been mine. He's enjoyed success built on the very corruption I tried to expose. Today, that ends." She reached into her purse one more time, and this time, she did pull out something that made everyone in the room tense up. But it wasn't a weapon. It was a thick, manila envelope. "Inside this envelope," Nicole said, "are the original documents I compiled 23 years ago, the evidence of the embezzlement at Hartwell and Associates. The evidence that Edward ignored, that cost me everything." She slid the envelope across the table to Morrison. "The senior partner, who was stealing money, was Thomas Caldwell. He's now the chief financial officer at Meridian Industries. He's been Edward's right-hand man for over 2 decades, and he's still stealing. The $4.7 million that's missing, Thomas took it, just like he's been taking money for 23 years. My world tilted on its axis. Thomas Caldwell, my most trusted advisor, the man I'd relied on for every major financial decision, the man who'd helped me build Meridian Industries into what it was today. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Is it?" Nicole asked. "When was the last time you personally audited the books, Edward? When was the last time you checked the accounts yourself instead of trusting Thomas to handle everything?" The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. I hadn't personally reviewed our financial records in years. I'd trusted Thomas completely, given him carte blanche to manage our accounts, our investments, our entire financial infrastructure. "The man you sent that message to," Morrison said slowly. "The one who's in your office right now, that's Thomas Caldwell, isn't it?" Nicole nodded. "I told him you'd discovered his theft, that the police were closing in. I told him he had one chance to destroy the evidence before he was arrested." Morrison was already on his radio, directing units to apprehend Thomas before he could escape. "But here's the beautiful part," Nicole said, her smile returning. "Thomas thinks I'm helping him. He has no idea that I've been documenting his crimes for years, building a case against him just like I built a case against you. He thinks we're partners, but really, he's just another piece on my chessboard." She pulled out one final item from her purse, another recording device. "Everything he's said to me over the past year is on here. Every admission of guilt, every detail of his theft, every plan to frame you for his crimes. He thought he was using me to destroy you, but I was using him to destroy both of you." The room was spinning. Nicole had orchestrated everything. Not just my downfall, but Thomas's as well. She'd played us against each other, using our trust and our weaknesses to engineer the destruction of everyone who'd wronged her. "The insurance inquiry, the forged documents, even the fake bank account in my name," I said slowly. "Thomas helped you with all of it." "Thomas provided the expertise," Nicole confirmed. "I provided the motivation. He thought he was covering up his own crimes by framing you. He never realized that I was gathering evidence against him the entire time. Morrison's radio crackled with an update. Suspect in custody. We found him trying to shred documents in the office. Looks like financial records going back years. Nicole clapped her hands together like a child at a birthday party. Perfect. Thomas is caught red-handed with the evidence of his own guilt. The real thief is finally exposed. But something still didn't make sense. If Nicole's plan was to expose Thomas as the real criminal, why had she tried so hard to frame me? Nicole, I said quietly, if you wanted justice for what happened 23 years ago, why didn't you just expose Thomas from the beginning? Why drag me through all this? Her smile faded, replaced by something cold and terrible. Because justice isn't just about punishing the guilty, Edward. It's about making the innocent suffer, too. You may not have stolen money, but you're guilty of something far worse. What? Indifference, she whispered. 23 years ago, you had the power to save my life, and you chose not to. You were too busy, too important, too focused on your own success to spare 5 minutes for someone who needed your help. She stood up, gathering her purse and her recording devices. Thomas will go to prison for theft, but you? You get to live with knowing that your entire life's work was built on a foundation of corruption you were too arrogant to see. You get to live with knowing that if you'd just listened to me 23 years ago, none of this would have happened. Morrison moved to stop her, but Nicole wasn't trying to escape. She was just standing there, looking at me with eyes full of satisfaction and sadness. The charges against you will be dropped, she said. The evidence will show that Thomas was the real thief. You'll get your company back, your reputation restored. But you'll never get back the most important thing. What's that? Your peace of mind, because now you know the truth. You know that every success you've enjoyed, every dollar you've made, every accolade you've received, all of it was possible, because a corrupt man you trusted was stealing to make it happen. She paused at the door, looking back one last time. Sleep well, Edward, if you can. As the door closed behind her, I realized that Nicole had won after all. Not through fraud or theft or any of the crimes she'd committed. She'd won by forcing me to see the truth about myself, about my life, about the choices I'd made and the consequences I'd ignored. And that was a victory I could never take away from her. 6 months later, I stood in my rebuilt office at Meridian Industries, watching the morning sun paint the river gold through floor-to-ceiling windows I'd had installed during the renovation. The space looked nothing like it had before. Gone were the heavy mahogany furnishings and intimidating corporate artwork that had defined my old office. In their place, I'd chosen simple, clean lines and natural light. A fresh start deserved a fresh environment. The legal proceedings had concluded 2 weeks ago. Thomas Caldwell received 15 years in federal prison for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The prosecution had used Nicole's recordings as key evidence, along with the financial documents she'd preserved for over 2 decades. The irony wasn't lost on me that my wife's 23-year quest for revenge had finally delivered the justice she'd originally sought. Nicole herself had received a suspended sentence and probation in exchange for her cooperation with the investigation. The judge had been surprisingly sympathetic to her story, viewing her actions as an elaborate, whistleblowing operation rather than a simple fraud scheme. She'd moved back to her maiden name and relocated to Portland, where she'd started working as a financial crimes consultant for a nonprofit organization that helped white-collar crime victims. We'd spoken only once since the trial ended. She'd called to inform me that she was filing for divorce and to apologize, not for destroying my life, but for the years of deception that had preceded it. I'm not sorry for exposing the truth, she'd said, but I am sorry for lying to you about who I was. You deserve to know that you were married to Sarah Brennan. I'd accepted the apology, though forgiveness was still a work in progress. The company had recovered remarkably well. Once the real source of our financial irregularities had been exposed, investor confidence returned quickly. We'd implemented new oversight procedures, hired an independent auditing firm, and established a whistleblower protection program that guaranteed any employee could report concerns directly to me without fear of retaliation. It was that last change that had given me the most satisfaction. Margaret knocked on my office door, interrupting my morning contemplation. She'd stayed with the company through everything, becoming my most trusted advisor in the process. "Edward," she said, "there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." I turned from the window, curious. "Who is it?" "Jessica Chen. She says she's Patricia's daughter." I remembered Jessica vaguely, a recent college graduate with a degree in finance, fresh-faced and eager. Patricia had mentioned that her daughter was looking for work in the financial sector. "Send her in." Jessica entered nervously, clutching a manila folder against her chest. She was young, maybe 24, with the same intelligent eyes as her mother, but without Patricia's confidence. She reminded me of someone, though I couldn't place who. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, "thank you for seeing me without an appointment." "Of course, please sit down. What can I do for you?" She perched on the edge of the chair across from my desk, still clutching her folder. "I work at Pemberton Financial as a junior analyst. I've been there for 6 months." I nodded. Richard Pemberton's firm was one of our competitors, though we maintained cordial professional relationships. "Mr. Hartwell, I've discovered something I think you need to know about." A chill ran down my spine. "What kind of something?" Jessica opened her folder and pulled out a stack of financial documents. "I've been reviewing some of our client accounts, and I've found what appears to be a systematic scheme to overcharge clients for services that were never provided. The amounts involved are substantial, possibly over $3 million across multiple accounts." I stared at the documents, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu. A young financial analyst, nervously presenting evidence of corporate fraud to someone in authority. The parallels to Nicole's story were unmistakable. "Have you reported this to anyone at Pemberton Financial?" I asked gently. Jessica shook her head. "I tried to discuss it with my supervisor, but he told me I was misunderstanding the billing structure. When I pressed the issue, he suggested I might not be cut out for this type of work." There it was. The same dismissive response that had derailed Nicole's career 23 years ago. "Jessica," I said carefully, "why are you bringing this to me instead of pursuing it within your own company?" She took a deep breath. "Because I heard about what happened to your wife, about how she tried to report fraud years ago and was ignored. I know you weren't the one who ignored her, but you were part of the system that failed her." I felt the weight of Nicole's words from 6 months ago. "You'll never get back your peace of mind." "I don't want to end up like her," Jessica continued, bitter and angry and spending decades planning revenge, "but I also don't want to pretend I didn't see this." I studied the young woman across from my desk, seeing in her the same earnest determination that Nicole must have had at 26. The same desire to do the right thing, the same vulnerability to being crushed by a system that valued conformity over integrity. "What would you like me to do with this information?" I asked. "Help me report it properly. Help me make sure it gets to the right people, people who will actually investigate instead of covering it up." I thought about Nicole, about the choice I'd made 23 years ago that had set everything in motion. I thought about the young woman sitting across from me, trusting me not to make the same mistake twice. "Jessica," I said, "I want you to know that bringing this to me took real courage, the kind of courage that most people don't have." She relaxed slightly. "Does that mean you'll help me?" "It means I'm going to do more than help you. I'm going to make sure this investigation is conducted properly, transparently, and with full protection for you as the whistleblower." I reached for my phone and dialed the direct number for FBI agent Sarah Morrison, Detective Morrison's sister who specialized in white-collar crime. "Agent Morrison, this is Edward Hartwell. I need to report suspected financial fraud, and I have a witness who needs federal protection. Yes, I'll hold." While I waited for the agent to come back on the line, I looked at Jessica. "There's something I want you to understand. What you're doing right now, speaking up, refusing to be silenced. This is exactly what my wife tried to do 23 years ago. She was ignored, dismissed, and ultimately destroyed for telling the truth. Jessica's eyes widened. What happened to her? She lost everything. Her career, her reputation, her future. But she never stopped believing that the truth mattered, even when it cost her everything. Agent Morrison came back on the line, and I spent the next 10 minutes explaining the situation. She agreed to meet with Jessica that afternoon and assured me that the investigation would be handled at the federal level with full whistleblower protection. After I hung up, Jessica was staring at me with something like awe. "Mr. Hartwell, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think your wife would have forgiven you for what happened 23 years ago?" I considered the question carefully. I think forgiveness isn't really the point. The point is learning from our mistakes and doing better the next time we're faced with the same choice. Jessica nodded slowly. "And this is your next time?" "Yes, and I'm not going to waste it." She gathered her documents and stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Mr. Hartwell, I think what your wife did was wrong. The way she went about getting justice, I mean. But I also think I understand why she did it." "So do I said quietly. After Jessica left, I walked back to the window and looked out over the city. Somewhere out there, Nicole was starting her new life, finally free of the anger that had consumed her for so long. And here I was, finally understanding the responsibility that came with power and privilege. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment my heart raced, wondering if Nicole was reaching out again. But when I opened it, I found something entirely different. "Saw the news about the Pemberton investigation. Proud of you for doing the right thing this time. S. Sarah." Nicole was still using her original first name. I typed back carefully, "Thank you. I hope you find peace." Her response came quickly. "I already have." I deleted both messages and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Some chapters in life end with dramatic confrontations and explosive revelations. Others end quietly with simple acknowledgments and mutual understanding. That evening, I drove home to my new apartment downtown, a smaller place with better light and no memories of deception. I'd given the house to Nicole as part of the divorce settlement, feeling it was the least I could do for someone whose life I'd inadvertently derailed. As I prepared dinner for one, I reflected on the strange turns my life had taken. I'd lost a wife, but gained a deeper understanding of myself. I'd nearly lost my company, but discovered a renewed sense of purpose. I'd been forced to confront uncomfortable truths about my past, but found unexpected peace in accepting responsibility for my failures. The old Edward would have seen this as defeat. Being outsmarted by his own wife, exposed as naive and careless, stripped of the illusions that had sustained him for decades. But the new Edward understood that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted was the only way to discover what you actually needed. I needed to be the kind of person who listened when others spoke truth to power. I needed to be the kind of leader who protected the vulnerable instead of ignoring them. I needed to be the kind of man who acknowledged his mistakes instead of hiding from them. Nicole had taken 23 years to teach me these lessons, using methods that were both brilliant and terrible. But in the end, she'd given me something more valuable than the company, the money, or the reputation she'd tried to destroy. She'd given me the chance to become someone worthy of the power I wielded. And for that gift, delivered through chaos and wrapped in destruction, I would always be grateful. As I sat down to eat my simple dinner in my quiet apartment, I realized that for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free from the weight of unexamined success, free from the burden of willful blindness, free from the fear of confronting uncomfortable truths. Nicole had won her war against me, but in losing, I'd discovered something she'd never intended to give me: redemption. And perhaps that was justice of a different kind, the kind that transforms rather than destroys, that builds rather than tears down, that creates possibilities instead of ending them. The kind of justice that would have been impossible if I hadn't first lost everything I thought I needed. Outside my window, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing another life, another story, another chance to choose compassion over indifference. Tomorrow, I would go back to work and continue building something better than what I'd lost. Tonight, I would simply be grateful for the opportunity to try.